I was 17 when my father shook hands with a man I'd never seen before and accepted an envelope thick with cash. I remember the weight of that moment, not the money changing hands, but the way my mother turned her face to the kitchen window, her shoulders shaking silently. The way my little sister Emma gripped my hand so hard her nails left half moons in my palm. The way the stranger looked at me with eyes that seemed to see straight through to some truth I didn't yet understand. They called it an arrangement, a job opportunity, a chance to help the family. But we all knew what it really was. Let me back up. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I grew up in a small town in rural Pennsylvania where everyone knew everyone's business and poverty wasn't just a statistic. It was the neighbor who couldn't afford heat in January, the classmate who wore the same 3 shirts all year, the constant hum of worry that colored every conversation at the dinner table. My father, Tom Mitchell, had worked at the lumber mill for 23 years. He was a good man, the kind who'd give you the shirt off his back even when he only had 2. He coached Little League on weekends, helped neighbors fix their cars, never missed a Sunday at St. Mary's. When the mill closed down, outsourced to somewhere overseas where labor was cheaper, it broke something in him that I don't think ever fully healed. He tried. God, he tried. Odd jobs here and there. A stint at the hardware store that lasted 3 months before they cut hours. Unemployment ran out. Savings, what little there was, evaporated like morning dew. My mother, Linda, took a job at the diner, offered 22, working doubles until her feet swelled and her smile became something she had to remember how to do. I picked up shifts at the grocery store after school, bagging and stocking, anything to help. But it wasn't enough. It's never enough when you're racing against a tide that just keeps rising. The medical bills started after Emma's accident. She was 12, riding her bike down Maple Street when a truck ran a stop sign. Broken femur, internal bleeding, 3 surgeries. The insurance we had, the bare minimum plan my dad qualified for after the mill covered maybe 30%. The rest became a mountain of debt that cast a shadow over everything. I watched my parents age 10 years and 6 months. My father's hair went from salt and pepper to solid gray. My mother developed a twitch in her left eye that never quite went away. They stopped sleeping in the same room. My dad would sit at the kitchen table until 3 in the morning, staring at bills with a look of such utter defeat that it made my chest physically ache. And then Emma needed another surgery. A follow-up the doctors said was critical. $28,000 we didn't have. That's when the stranger came to town. His name was Marcus Webb, though I wouldn't learn his full story until much later. He was maybe 50, maybe 61 of those men whose age is impossible to pin down. Tall, with broad shoulders that suggested former athleticism, silver hair cut neat and short, and hands that looked like they'd done real work despite the expensive watch on his wrist. He wore dark jeans and a plain gray sweater, nothing flashy. But there was a quality to him, a kind of weight that made people notice. He'd been staying at the Riverside Inn for 2 weeks, taking his coffee at Millie's Diner every morning, asking quiet questions around town, about families, about opportunities, about young people looking for work. Mrs. Henderson, who ran the inn, said he was polite. Kept to himself mostly. Paid in cash. Mr. Chen at the post office said he'd received several packages, heavy ones, from addresses all over the country. The rumors started small whispers at the grocery store, murmurs after church. A wealthy man looking for help. Good money, real money. The kind that could change a family situation overnight. My father heard it from Dale Munson, whose own daughter had apparently been placed with a wealthy family downstate the year before. Changed their whole life. Dale said, leaning against his pickup in the church parking lot, Jessica's doing real well. Sends money home every month. Good people, Tom. Real good people. I remember the conversation because I was standing 10 feet away, loading Emma's wheelchair into our rusted Corolla, and I heard every word. I saw the way my father's expression shifted from skepticism to something else, something desperate. That night, he and my mother fought in hushed voices behind their bedroom door. I couldn't make out words, but I understood the tone. Desperation sounds the same in any language. 2 days later, Marcus Webb came to our house. He knocked at exactly 7 p.m., just as we were finishing dinner, or what passed for dinner those days. Thin soup, day-old bread from the diner where Mom worked, some bruised apples I'd gotten free from the grocery store's discard pile. My father answered. I could see them through the doorway, my dad's posture stiff and defensive, the strangers relaxed and patient. They talked on the porch for maybe 5 minutes before my father invited him in. Marcus Webb entered our small living room like a stranger entering sacred ground, carefully, respectfully, taking in everything, the worn furniture, the television that only got 3 channels, the photos on the wall documenting better times, Emma's wheelchair folded in the corner. His eyes landed on me, and I felt something shift in the air. "This is Sarah," my father said, his voice carrying a tremor I'd never heard before. "Sarah, this is Mr. Webb. He's here to discuss an opportunity." I remember what I was wearing, an old flannel shirt that used to be my dad's, jeans with a patch on the knee, my hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. I remember feeling suddenly aware of how small our house was, how shabby everything looked, how the shame of poverty isn't just about lacking money, it's about feeling exposed, vulnerable, less than. "Hello, Sarah," Marcus said. His voice was low and steady, the kind of voice that suggested he meant every word he spoke. "Your father's told me about your family situation. I'd like to help. We don't need charity," I said quickly. Pride is funny that way. It's often the last thing poor people hold on to. "I'm not offering charity," he replied, pulling out a chair. At our kitchen table and sitting without waiting for an invitation. Not rude, exactly, but confident. "I'm offering a transaction. 1 year of work in exchange for $100,000. The number hung in the air like something physical. My mother made a small sound, quickly stifled. Emma, sitting in her wheelchair by the window, went very still. My father's face did something complicated, hope and horror mixing into an expression that would haunt my dreams for months. "What kind of work?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Marcus looked at me for a long moment. "Domestic work, primarily. Cooking, cleaning, some secretarial duties. My home is large, and I travel frequently. I need someone reliable. Where?" "I have several properties. You'd primarily be at my estate in Vermont." "Vermont," I repeated flatly. "That's 7 hours away." 8, he corrected. "It's isolated, which some find difficult, but the work isn't harsh, and the pay is substantial. 50,000 up front, to be given directly to your family. The remaining 50,000 upon successful completion of 1 year, to be given to you for your future." I looked at my parents. My father was staring at the table like he might find answers in the worn wood grain. My mother had her hand over her mouth, tears streaming silently down her face. Emma was crying too, but she was watching me with an expression that shattered something inside my chest. "You want to buy me," I said. "I want to employ you," Marcus corrected, "with terms that benefit everyone involved." "Why me?" "Why our family?" He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Because you need it most. And because when I spoke to people in this town, your name came up over and over. Hardworking, reliable, smart, kind. Those are qualities worth investing in." "This is insane," I said, looking at my father. "Dad, this is insane." But my father couldn't meet my eyes. And that's when I knew. The decision had already been made. We negotiated, if you can call it that, for another hour. Marcus was patient, answering every question with the same steady calm. Yes, I would have my own room. Yes, I could call home once a week. Yes, I could leave if the situation became untenable, though the financial arrangement would be void. No, there were no other expectations, a delicate way of addressing the question we were all thinking, but nobody wanted to say aloud that he had papers. Real papers, drawn up by a lawyer, everything official and binding. My parents read them 3 times. I read them once and felt the walls of my future closing in. I need to think about it, I said finally. Of course, Marcus replied, standing. I'll be at the inn for 2 more days. After that, I'll need to move on. He handed my father a business card, shook his hand, nodded to my mother, and then looked at me one more time. Sarah, for what it's worth, I'm not your enemy. I hope you'll come to see that. Then he left. The house felt smaller after he was gone, like his presence had somehow expanded it, and his absence made it contract. Nobody spoke. My mother went to her room. My father sat at the table with his head in his hands. Emma wheeled herself over to me and wrapped her thin arms around my waist. You don't have to, she whispered, but we both knew that was a lie. I made them wait the full 2 days, some stubborn part of me refusing to make it easy. I thought about running away. I thought about calling the police, though I wasn't sure what crime was being committed. Desperation isn't illegal, and everything Marcus proposed was technically above board. I thought about just saying no, damn the consequences, but then I saw the notice from the hospital. Final warning before collections. And I saw my sister still recovering, still needing physical therapy we couldn't afford. And I saw my parents, these good people who'd done everything right and still ended up here, broken by a system that didn't care. So on the 2nd day, I walked to the Riverside Inn and told Marcus Webb I'd do it. The $50,000 was wired to my parents' account that afternoon. The surgery was scheduled for the following week. And 3 days later, I packed a single duff case, hugged my family goodbye, and got into Marcus Webb's black Mercedes for the 8-hour drive to Vermont. My mother held me so tight I couldn't breathe. My father couldn't stop apologizing. Emma gave me her favorite stuffed rabbit, a worn thing named Hopscotch that she'd had since she was 4, and made me promise to bring it back. 1 year, I told them. It's just 1 year. I believed it then. I don't know if they did. The drive was quiet. Marcus didn't try to make conversation, just drove with steady competence, occasionally pointing out landmarks or offering to stop for food. I stared out the window and watched Pennsylvania give way to New York to Vermont. Familiar landscapes dissolving into unfamiliar ones. We arrived as the sun was setting. The estate, because that's what it was. Not a house, but an estate sat at the end of a long private road, surrounded by forest. It was older, Victorian maybe, 3 stories of weathered gray stone and dark wood, with towers and gables and windows that caught the dying light like watchful eyes. Not quite scary, but not quite welcoming either. It's been in my family for generations, Marcus said as we pulled up. I know it looks imposing. You'll get used to it. Inside was different than I expected. Not cold and museum-like, but warm, lived in, books everywhere, comfortable furniture, fireplaces that actually got used, photos on tables and walls showing a life that had been lived, though I noticed all the photos seemed to stop at a certain point, as if time itself had frozen in this house 20 years ago. He showed me to my room on the 2nd floor. It was bigger than my entire bedroom at home, with an actual 4-poster bed, a desk by the window, my own bathroom. There were fresh flowers on the nightstand, books on the shelves, and a quality to the silence that felt like respect for personal space. Dinner is at 7, Marcus said from the doorway. Come down when you're ready. No rush. Then he was gone, and I was alone. I sat on the bed and cried for the first time since agreeing to this. Not because the room was bad, it was better than anywhere I'd ever slept, but because it wasn't home. And I wasn't there by choice, not really. And the weight of what my family had done, what I'd agreed to, crashed over me all at once. That first dinner was awkward. Marcus had cooked pasta, salad, bread that he'd apparently baked himself. We ate at a small table in the kitchen rather than the formal dining room. He asked about my trip, about my comfort level, about dietary restrictions. Small talk that felt surreal given the circumstances. I want to be clear about expectations, he said finally, pushing his plate aside. This isn't slavery, Sarah. It's not servitude. Yes, I need help managing this house, but you're not a maid. You're an employee with dignity and autonomy. If I ever make you uncomfortable, say so. If you want to leave, the door is not locked. The money's already with your family. Nobody can take that back. Then why would I stay? I asked. If the money's already sent, what's keeping me here? He smiled, but it was sad. Your word. Your character. The knowledge that your family needs the second half of that arrangement. He paused. And maybe, eventually, the realization that you're not a prisoner. You're a person I'm asking to help me with something I can't do alone, which is live in this house. Keep it alive. Stop it from becoming a tomb. I didn't understand what he meant then, but I would. The first weeks were strange, finding our rhythm. Marcus was fastidious about not treating me like a servant. We cooked together more often than not. Cleaning was divided. He handled the heavy maintenance. I managed the everyday upkeep. He worked in his office, something involving investments and consulting, though he never talked much about it while I read. Studied he'd offered to pay for online classes, and tried not to think too hard about the surreal nature of my situation. He was gone frequently, sometimes for days at a time, leaving me alone in this enormous house with instructions to call if I needed anything and a phone number that always answered within 2 rings. Slowly, the house revealed itself. I found photos tucked in books, stored in boxes, hidden in drawers. A woman with dark hair and Marcus's eyes, younger Marcus, laughing. A teenage girl with a bright smile. The 3 of them together, family. I found a room on the 3rd floor that was locked. Marcus's office. The one door he asked me never to open. I found letters, dated and saved, from the girl in the photos. College letters, home for the holidays, news and love, and the everyday intimacy of a daughter writing to her father. I found obituaries. The woman, Catherine Webb, beloved wife. The girl, Lily Webb, cherished daughter. Both dated the same day, 15 years ago. Car accident, winter roads, black ice, tragedy in an instant. And I began to understand Marcus wasn't a predator. He wasn't some wealthy creep with sinister intentions. He was a man who lost everything that mattered and had somehow kept living anyway. Rattling around this enormous house full of ghosts, trying to figure out what came next. He wasn't buying a servant. He was trying to buy back sound in a house that had been silent too long. I didn't confront him about it. Some things are too personal, too raw. But my attitude shifted. I started actually engaging, asking questions, listening to his stories. He'd been a professor once. Taught economics at a small college, loved it. Gave it up after the accident because standing in front of classrooms full of young people, the age his daughter would never be, became unbearable. We fell into an odd friendship, if you can call it that. Teacher and student, father figure and distant daughter. 2 people brought together by desperation and money, but staying together because of something else. Something human. He taught me things. Economics, yes, but also literature, philosophy, how to appreciate good wine illegally, but in the privacy of that isolated house, who was checking. How to cook properly, how to think critically about the world. We'd debate late into the night, arguing about politics, ethics, the nature of justice. He never talked down to me, never treated my opinions as less valid because I was younger, poorer, less educated. "You have a good mind," he'd say. "Don't waste it." I called home once a week, as promised. Emma's surgery had gone well. She was walking again, slowly. My parents had paid off the medical debt, caught up on the mortgage, were breathing for the first time in years. My mother cried every time we talked, apologizing. My father could barely speak. Emma just wanted to know when I was coming home. Soon, I'd say. Just a little longer. The seasons changed. Fall gave way to winter, Vermont winter that buried the house in white silence. Marcus and I were snowed in for a week once, and it should have been claustrophobic. But it wasn't. We cooked elaborate meals, watched old movies, sat by the fire while he told me about his life before the accident, and I told him about mine. And we were just two people keeping each other company against the cold. Spring came. I'd been there 8 months. The second payment, my payment, the $50,000 for me, was set to transfer in 4 months. At the 1-year mark, that's when Marcus got sick. It started small. Fatigue, weight loss, a cough that wouldn't quit. He dismissed it at first, just age, just stress. But it got worse. I found him collapsed in the kitchen one morning and called 911. The ambulance took 40 minutes to reach us. Our isolation suddenly dangerous. The diagnosis was cancer. Late stage, pancreatic, the kind with survival rates measured in months, not years. He took the news with the same steady calm he approached everything. Made arrangements, called lawyers, updated his will. And then he sat me down in the library and told me I was free to go. "The contract's void," he said. His face was thinner, his eyes tired. "The money's still yours. I've arranged that regardless. But you don't need to stay. I won't hold you to something that was always more about my needs than yours." "You're dying," I said, the word catching in my throat. "Yes. And you want me to just leave?" "I want you to live your life, Sarah. You've already given me more than you know. You brought sound back to this house. You reminded me what it felt like to have someone to care about, someone to teach, someone to..." He trailed off, then smiled. "To Dad, I suppose. You reminded me who I used to be. I'm not leaving," I said. "Sarah, I'm not leaving. The contract's not void. 4 more months. You need someone here, and I'm not letting you go through this alone." We argued about it for an hour, but in the end I stayed. Those last months were hard. Watching someone die is witnessing a kind of gradual disappearing, the person you knew fading increment by increment while their shell remains. Marcus got weaker. The treatments didn't work. He'd started them too late, and they were more about buying time than curing anything. But we had good days too. Days where he felt strong enough to sit in the garden, to talk, to teach me one more thing. He'd decided I should go to college, insisted on paying for it, wouldn't hear any arguments. He'd set up a trust that would cover 4 years anywhere I wanted to go, plus living expenses. "You're too smart to bag groceries," he'd say. "Promise me you'll do something with that mind." I promised. He died on a Tuesday in June, 1 week before my contract would have officially ended. I was with him, holding his hand, and his last words were, "Thank you for staying." The funeral was small. Some colleagues from his teaching days, a few neighbors, me. They all assumed I was a niece, some distant relative, and I didn't correct them. Let them think what they wanted. His lawyer explained the will. The house was being donated to a nonprofit that ran programs for at-risk youth. The rest of his estate, and it was substantial, was being split. Part to various charities. Part to his late wife's family. And $200,000 to me. Double what we'd agreed. He said you'd try to refuse it, the lawyer told me. He made me promise to tell you that it's not charity. It's payment for services rendered and a father's final gift to someone who reminded him what it meant to be a father. His words, not mine. I drove home to Pennsylvania in the same Mercedes Marcus had driven me away in, which had also been left to me. My family had moved not far, just to a better neighborhood. A house with enough bedrooms that Emma didn't have to sleep on the couch anymore. They were waiting when I pulled up top. My mother hugged me and couldn't stop crying. My father kept saying, "You're home, you're home," like he couldn't quite believe it. Emma, taller now, walking without a limp, returned hopscotch and told me she'd kept him safe, like I'd kept my promise. What was he like? She asked later, when we were alone in what was now my room. The man who bought you? I thought about that for a long time before answering. He wasn't who anyone thought he was, I said finally. He wasn't a villain or a savior. He was just a sad man who needed help being human again. And I think maybe I did too. I used the money to go to college like I promised. Economics in his honor. I did well. Got into a good graduate program. Built a career. Built to life. I got married, had kids, watched them grow up in a world that was kinder to them than it had been to me at their age, but I never forgot that year in Vermont. Never forgot Marcus Webb, the man my family sold me to, who turned out to be exactly what I needed, even though nobody understood that at the time. He gave me more than money. He gave me education, confidence, a vision of who I could become. He gave me the gift of being seen as a person worth investing in when the world had taught me I was only worth what I could produce. Was it wrong, what my parents did? Yeah, probably, definitely. No kid should have to be the solution to their family's problems. No parent should have to make that choice. The system that forced us all into that situation was the real villain, the real violence. But was Marcus Webb wrong? I don't think so. He saw a family in crisis and a girl with potential, and he found a way to help that served everyone involved. Could he have just given us the money? Maybe, but there's a dignity in work and earning, even in strange circumstances. And maybe he needed me as much as we needed him. Maybe we saved each other. I'm 60 now, Marcus's age when we met. My own kids are grown. I think about him often, especially when I'm teaching economics at the same small college where he once worked, standing in front of students and seeing their potential the way he saw mine. Last year, I visited the house in Vermont. It's a youth center now, helping kids from circumstances like mine, giving them opportunities and education and a place to feel safe. There's a plaque by the door, the Marcus and Lily Webb Center for Educational Advancement. I stood in the library where we used to debate late into the night, and I could almost hear his voice, patient and encouraging, pushing me to think harder, be better, become more . My family sold me to a stranger, but he wasn't who they thought he was. He wasn't who I thought he was. Either. He was the person who looked at a desperate girl from a desperate family and saw not an opportunity to exploit, but an opportunity to change a life. And in changing mine, I changed his too, pulling him out of the grief that had frozen him for 15 years, giving him a reason to care again, to teach again, to be Marcus Webb the dad and the professor instead of Marcus Webb the ghost haunting his own house. I don't tell this story often. People don't understand. They hear my family sold me and they stop listening, already horrified, already judging. And I get it. It sounds bad. It was bad. The circumstances that led to it were inexcusable, but the year that followed, the person I became because of it, the life Marcus Webb made possible, that wasn't bad. That was grace in the darkest circumstances. That was humanity finding a way. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd said no. If I'd refused and my family had lost the house, and Emma hadn't gotten her surgery, and I'd spent my life angry at circumstances. I couldn't control instead of educated and empowered by someone who chose to help. I don't know. Alternate histories are just stories we tell ourselves. What I do know is this. I was 17 and desperate, and a stranger offered me a year of my life in exchange for money my family desperately needed. I said yes, and that stranger turned out to be exactly the person I needed to meet, a teacher, a mentor, a father figure who saw me as more than my circumstances and invested in who I could become. My name is Sarah Mitchell Webb. I took his name when I inherited his papers, his books, his mission. I tell his story not because it's simple or easy, but because it's true. Because sometimes the people who save us don't look like saviors. Sometimes they look like strangers offering complicated bargains. And sometimes the thing that looks like an ending is actually a beginning in disguise. I was sold to a stranger, and he gave me my life back.